can begin to see that all of a sudden there are many, many Christians meeting in house churches and meeting here and there all over Russia without a church building. No church building, but there you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So where is the need right now?
Today, at least half the world's population have absolutely no other way to hear the gospel than through superpower radio. The reason for its existence is that people might hear of Jesus Christ, might come to him.
The only way you can reach them, as quickly as possible, it is through their radio. So I beg you people to broadcast more gospel, send more the spoken word of God.
The people are ready to receive it. We found that out in India, we found it out in China, we found it out now in Eastern Europe there, in Russia and in Romania. The people are hungry for the Word of God. And we need to send more missionaries, send more Bibles, send more cassette New Testaments.
Striking like lightning. Cataclysmic shock waves are still shaking the foundations of an old world order. Oppressive communistic regimes are in collapse, and unbelievable barriers have suddenly been broken open to lightning strike penetrations from gospel ministry teams. One such SWAT team striking like lightning with an array of special ministries is the Spoken Word of God, based in Orlando, Florida. This work was originally founded by R.B. Jack Turney 20 years ago for the purpose of producing recorded Bibles in the world's major languages. The ministry has grown to include international radio broadcast, distribution of tracts, printed Bibles, spiritual resources on audio and video cassette tapes, planting and building churches, evangelistic crusades, and many special relief projects.
I thank the Lord for the testimony of this work. You know, it's wonderful to go to work and realize that work has a testimony for Jesus Christ. I think that's a major thing, and Christian Duplication has had that and is being used of God around the world. And then I especially thank the Lord for the spoken word of God and what that means. It's a joy to work together.
Mr. Turney has placed on audio cassette tapes the spoken word of God, and thus distributing these audio cassette tapes all over the world in many foreign languages, assisting pastors and missionaries and placing these materials in the hands of even blind people in Eastern Europe, as I saw Mr. Turney do firsthand with his ministry. We thank God for the Spoken Word of God ministry and for its worldwide outreach.
We took with us the first copies of the New Testament in the Russian language. And interestingly enough, in Russia, in Moscow, one of the first blind people we met was in the studio that Transworld Radio had established. A young man came in with a guitar, and he was playing that guitar on the set there, making some music for a particular broadcast. And we learned that this young man was blind. And we talked to him, and he was converted to Jesus Christ through listening to Transworld Radio. It's an interesting thing that Transworld Radio had been broadcasting into Russia for some 30 years. And this young man was a product of that, and Jack Turney, who is the founder of the Spoken Word of God, indirectly had a great part in that young man's salvation. So I thought it was providential that we met him, that our paths crossed, and that Dr. Turney was able to present that young man with the first cassette New Testament ever distributed in Moscow.
Today, the Spoken Word of God broadcasts the Bible in 14 languages, over 150 stations, maintains several overseas cassette duplication centers, ministers to the blind, has helped to build over 30 church buildings in needy countries, continues to produce additional recordings of the Scriptures in major languages, and has assisted Bible college students with tuition scholarship assistance.
As president of the Spoken Word of God in Orlando, Florida here, I want to present to you a check. We'll call it a scholarship fund so that you and your wife might continue your education at Liberty University and be prepared to go back to your country and teach and preach the Word of God. So as president of the Spoken Word of God in Orlando, Florida, I want to say God bless you. Here is a nice check for you, and I trust it'll be a great asset in helping you further the ministry of the gospel.
I just want to thank you so much for this, and especially I just want to thank you for the burden in your heart which you have for the Word of God for our country. So this is not my deserved thing, but is your merit and your honor to have the Word of God broadcasted and sent there in Romania by cassettes.
As a direct result of the spoken Word of God striking like lightning around the world, churches, schools, and clinics have sprung up. Young men have been called into full-time Christian service, and the gospel is spread like advancing thunderstorms around the globe.
The secret is this. There are two great ways of reaching these people. One is by radio. The most effective way to reach China and the most effective way to reach India. As a matter of fact, the most effective way to reach any country, anywhere on the face of God's earth, and that includes the United States, is by radio and TV. If you miss those two, you've missed your greatest opportunity.
And the only Bibles they have are those that they've written down. They've written down things they've heard on the radio. They've written down things they've heard preachers preach on. And if we can give them a printed Bible, they will gladly give us their handwritten Bible because they have no written Bible. And so when a broadcast like Spoken Word of God goes in, people are writing down things that they hear. They might not get every word, but they know what book they're hearing, what chapter, and they're writing down key thoughts at least. And this will be their Bible.
There are some places where you can't go. There are no missionaries in India. We're not allowed to be there. We go in this tourist, of course, for a few weeks or months, but you can't send missionaries to India. I went into a high school principal's house one night along with Brother Turney, and we were talking about the spoken Word of God. And this man didn't know we were coming, didn't know anything about it. He reached around and turned the on switch to an FM radio. And there was the Word of God coming right over from Sri Lanka into his house. He said we listen every day. Now I'm saying all of that to say, to get the gospel to the masses, we must invest in media. And I'm thankful to God for what the spoken word is doing in getting the gospel out through the mass media. It's a good investment.
In the last 3 years, the spoken Word of God has made dramatic advances into Eastern Europe and the Commonwealth of Soviet states. Each trip brings renewed cries for printed and cassette Bibles, assistance to train gospel workers and build churches. The hunger and openness for Christianity in these formerly communistic countries is the most significant development in the modern missionary movement. Listen now to but a few brief reports from recent campaigns into these countries.
The mother sat down with the cassette Bible, put in the cassette, and started at Matthew 1, recited the entire book of Matthew from verbatim, and started crying. And what they say in Romania for something very good is such a fina, such a fina. And she sat there over and over and over saying such a fina, crying, and just saying that God was really blessing, and they were so thankful we'd come there. And now through the spoken word of God, we've been given some land there to build a Christian center. And we hope to get that started by the end of the year. And that's going to be $8,000 to $10,000 to put up a complete building, to have recording studios for the children's choirs, to have duplication facilities to put the Bible in cassette, to have an office or a couple bedrooms for missionaries going into Romania to be able to reside up in that area. And just the church sits right by it, and the church is going to preside over it and watch over it and take care of it. And we've hired 2 translators up in Romania now, up in that area in Transylvania. So the Lord is really providing many, many ministries through us. And we have visions of going and working in Albania. We have visions. We're now working on the Czechoslovakian Slavic version of the Bible. We just finished the Hungarian. We're looking at doing the Yugoslavian Serbian language. We want to do Dutch. We want to do many different languages that are in the works. These are just ones that are in the works.
Well, long about 10 o'clock at night, we started handing out Bibles in a lobby in Russia. Pretty soon, just as soon as we opened up and got started, opened up the boxes, that is, and got started, we had 50 people around us, and then in another 10 minutes we had 100 people, and another 5 or 10 minutes we had 200 people around us trying to get a Bible. And of course we were autographing these Bibles. We ran out after we used up about 1,000. So the next day we decided we would go out in front of the hotel where there were some park benches. So we went over to the container, loaded up the van, brought a whole lot of Bibles over there in front of this hotel. Pretty soon, when we got there with the Bibles, pretty soon there was 50 people around, and pretty soon there was 100 people around. And all day long, not just 15 or 20 minutes, all day long, we sat there and autographed Bibles, and never, not even for 5 minutes, did we not have an audience coming up and standing around us asking for a Bible and waiting, sometimes 20, 30, 40 minutes, waiting to get a Bible.
Well, the spoken word of God went to Russia. Mr. Turney had a vision of setting up a duplication center down in the Ukraine, there at a Bible college, and so he carried equipment in and set up a small duplication center where we could actually reproduce the Word of God on audio tape and distribute these tapes specifically to the blind and for others who might have a need for the Word of God on audio tape. And that was a dream that actually became a reality while we were there. We saw the first tapes being duplicated in the land where they said there is no God. Now the Word of God is being duplicated.
Ladies and gentlemen, we here at the Spoken Word of God are inundated by what the Lord is doing in Russia. We have here before you over 4,000 letters, each one requesting at least one Bible. One letter I read yesterday was from a young man who received the Bible. He wrote to us in English, said he received the Bible and thanked us. And in that letter was 9 more addresses for his friends. So that's 9, 10 people we can reach through the Spoken Word of God. And we have 4,000 letters here. Similar letters, some in English, some in Russian, some in Ukrainian, but all of them requesting one thing, Bibles.
So this particular project is urgent, and now we have over 4,000 right here at our international headquarters ready to go to Russia, and what we need is sponsorships of these Bibles. Let me say this, you pastors, you may want to sponsor 100 for your church. Your Sunday school may like to sponsor 10. You might want to sponsor 500. We've had several churches to take on this project and sponsored a lot of Bibles into Russia. One up in North Carolina, they sponsored, I suppose, over 1,000 Bibles into Russia.
Yes, the hour is late, and the needs are great. But there is a ministry which is striking like lightning around the world, an amazingly efficient ministry, which by God's grace is hitting enormous targets of the world's neediest peoples with the most pure and powerful substance in the universe, the very words of the true and living God. But they cannot do it alone. Your prayers and financial support are needed now. Please send your gifts today in support of one of the world's truly miraculous ministries, striking like lightning all around the world, the Spoken Word of God.